谁当家啊？你来当家。
Welcome to Residence Messenger program on Taipei Broadcasting Station. I'm your host, Ross Darrell Feingold. Today, it is our honor to have a very special guest from the French office in Taipei, Pierre Goulange. Pierre, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Should I say bienvenue? You know, my French isn't very good.
Sure, sounds great. Yeah.
No, I'm embarrassed to say that I did study French for 6 years as a child, but unfortunately I forgot most of it. Now my head is full of Mandarin. But Pierre, we're so honored to have you because next week, July 14th, is French National Day, or Bastille Day. But before we talk about Bastille Day and the French office in Taipei and the French community here in Taipei, tell us a little bit about yourself. Which part of France did you grow up?
Sure. So I was born in a very small city called Vichy. It's right in the middle of France. It's actually a city famous abroad for two things, actually. The first thing is World War II, because I guess in history textbook, this is how we say the Vichy government. This is where our government actually was during World War II. And the other reason, and here in Taiwan, actually, this is why most people know it, is because it's also the name of a brand, a cosmetics brand, because this city is very famous for water. Yes. So they actually use this water like to make, you know, like very special cosmetics.
Yeah, in fact, I thought you were going to say the water, not the cosmetics.
Yeah. But yeah, our Taiwanese friends actually, they know usually the brand. So when I say that I'm from Vichy, they actually
say like, skincare.
Yeah, but like cosmetics. Mostly they say, oh, I didn't know it was a city. So.
Which actually brings me to the next question I wanted to ask you, Pierre. When people bring up, non-French people bring up Bastille Day, or it comes up in conversation, what do they say to you, or how do you explain it easily? Because, I mean, every country has its national day. So how do you explain Bastille Day to non-French people?
Right. Yeah, it's never really easy because it's a kind of complicated history. But
which is why I asked you, how do you get it into a simplified version without giving people a long history lesson?
Long story short, usually we say Bastille Day comes from like the spirit of the French Revolution. So Bastille is the name of a jail, a prison, but it was in Paris. And in 1789, actually the people of Paris decided to kind of storm inside the jail to free people were staying there. Actually, it was only 7 people, I think. But it was the symbol of some kind of like arbitrary power and, you know, despotic power.
Political prisoners?
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is why today it kind of like became, you know, the like a symbol of the spirit of like human rights, democracy, and people's power, this kind of thing. So actually, officially, it's been our national day since 1880 only. So like a little bit more than 1 century.
And do non-French people try and connect with you by saying something about Bastille Day, but actually it's not correct, it doesn't fit the history? Or the one thing I want to ask you is, like, do they say like they've seen some movie, but I think you know which movie I'm talking about, but that actually is not about Bastille Day?
Oh, right. Not really. I mean, sometimes people say like, oh, this is your Independence Day.
But you say, well, France, sorry, it's been independent for quite a while.
It's like a little bit different. Or sometimes people say like, oh, that was such a violent history. Why do you guys celebrate this? And so I'm saying, you know, we have to explain also that it's also like, you know, a part like how France became what it is today. So yeah.
And what about the famous saying, let them eat cake? Did the Queen really say that?
What's that?
You know, the let them eat cake, you know. When
oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like, let them give like some brioche, I think in French it is. It's like this kind of like sweet bread. Yeah, I think she said something like that. I think that was also like a symbol of, you know, like a ruling elite, completely disconnected from like the needs of like people at that time. So yeah, actually this is like something famous. Yeah,
now, a lot of countries on their national day they have fireworks, and in America people like to have a barbecue. They get together with their friends. What do you remember growing up? You know, your generation, and you're a relatively young guy, unlike your host here. But what do you remember about ways people in France, French people celebrate Bastille Day?
So I think, well, one of the way actually people celebrate is like they get together. And what we do is that we have like public balls, like kind of like parties. So usually that will be organized by like, cities. So usually on the main square of cities, people will get together. There will be like, a band, music, people will dance together. There will be like food, drinks. I also remember like something when I was a kid, like, I don't think now they do it anymore, but when I was a kid, we will go to like the city hall. We will light a little like paper lantern, with the color of the French flags. We will do a little parade, in the city. Now we also have like a fireworks. So this is definitely a day when, if you travel in France, there will be like fireworks everywhere. Actually, the party usually actually takes place the day before, because the 14th of Bastille Day, 14th of July is holiday. So it's a day off. So people actually can, have fun, and, they don't need to go to work too the day after. But also in the morning, more on the official side, there will be a military parade. So this is also part of like the tradition. I think it's been like this since like the very first day of like Bastille Day as our official national day. So now it's on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and we'll have our military troops literally like walking in front of our government, French president, and it's in the morning. But I think people like, what they like to do is like getting together. Now, like these days with like big parties going on, it's not necessarily like, this kind of like traditional bands. It's more like, DJs and it's quite fun.
So is it considered the most important holiday of the year in France? I mean, is it more important, or say than Christmas, or is there another cultural festival that is equally important?
Well, I think it's an important celebration, definitely, but I think compared to Christmas, for example, it's more like with family. Like it's very like, intimate. You will spend time with your relatives, your loved one. I think July 14 is more about the fun and the party, getting together with like, people of your city. So it's very different. But it's definitely a big part. It's definitely an important day for us. But I think it will be a little bit different from like other holidays. Yeah.
And you've traveled and worked in a few different places around the world.
Right.
How would you compare the enthusiasm in France for Bastille Day compared to national days in other places?
I don't know. It's difficult to say. I think. I mean, the difference I noticed with like other like countries is really the party thing. Like, Bastille Day for French people is really about like celebration and, like party, dancing. I think this is something that I didn't necessarily observe when I was in other countries where it's more like official, more like formal ceremonies or, flag raising ceremonies, this kind of thing. So. It's definitely something that I actually noticed.
Well, I think it's fair to say, French people, good food, good wine. I mean, they know how to have a party, right?
Sure.
Now, you said earlier in the show that you grew up in Vichy. What did you want to be when you were growing up? Did you want to be in the foreign service, or did you have your heart set on a different career?
Well, no, absolutely. Well, you know what? When I was a kid, I didn't even know what a diplomat was, because Vichy is a small city. So I grew up in a very small town. When I was a kid, I was just like, I wanted to be a teacher. I just wanted to be. I kind of like changed like quite a lot of like times, but I wanted to be a doctor, then a teacher. But I really remember that there was something that I was very interested in. It was learning languages, like foreign languages. I enjoyed it. Actually, English was not even my first foreign language, but it was German. I studied learning German when I entered secondary school. I think my grandpa really encouraged me strongly to learn German, because he was himself sent to Germany as he was deported to Germany when he was during World War II. He was sent as a worker. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but during World War II, the French government actually sent like French workers as forced labor to Germany to contribute, in the effort of the war. So he spent a couple of years And I think after that, he's been a strong supporter of the French, German, friendship and kind of like reconciliation. Exactly. So for him, me learning German was also very meaningful. And very quickly, I really got fond of that language. I thought it was great to learn languages, to be able to speak with foreigners, because when you grow up, when you grow up in a small city, you're so curious about what's happening, outside, in other cities, in other countries. I think that was also why I was very curious about foreign countries and, everything really international, because I felt growing up it was in a very small city.
So is learning German as a second language or learning English as a second language more challenging?
Yeah, after learning German, English seemed to be easy, I would say. But the most difficult part was definitely the pronunciation when it comes to English. German is easier when it comes, you see the word, you can read it. Actually, I think you can sound it right. But English is, for French speakers, much more difficult. Yeah.
Oh, as a native English speaker, I think the grammar in both French and German is extremely difficult to learn. Yeah. What did you know about or hear about Asia when you were growing up in Vichy?
Wow, really. Asia was really, really, really far when I grew up. Vichy actually is also famous for a language school, French as a foreign language. There are a lot of international students coming up. So I remember there will be especially summer, there will be a lot of foreigners coming to Vichy to spend, a couple of months studying French. And I had a friend who actually was hosting some Chinese or Japanese students, and I think that was the first encounter I had with Asia.
When I was growing up in the 80s, and I used to go visit France with my family, because my family liked to visit France. France at the time was known for lots of Japanese tourists. Right? They were coming to Paris and buying everything up in Paris during the 80s. So did you encounter more Chinese or Japanese when you were in Vichy growing up?
I think at that time, because that was mostly 80s, 90s, at that time that was more Japanese. Yeah, definitely.
And then you went to university in Lyon,
right? Yeah,
which is a big city by French standards, but compared to the major cities we have here in Asia, it's still kind of small. That's right. And you obtained a degree in philosophy. First, tell us about what it was like studying in Lyon, because I think of it as just another one of these very beautiful European cities.
Yeah, so Lyon is it's a very beautiful city, definitely. You just said it. So if you travel in France, I highly recommend you to go. And actually, it's pretty famous for its food. It's considered as the kind of capital of France when it comes to food. It has a lot of specialties. When I was a student, and as you said, I was studying philosophy. Actually, I was a pretty serious student, so I will mostly read and spend time with my friends and classmates to have some discussions and debates with a bottle of wine. This is how we. This
sounds really difficult. How did you pass the classes?
Yeah, I even wonder myself. No, that was great. But it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of discussion. To me, that was really also a time when I kind of started reading a lot. Before, when I grew up, I didn't read that much. But when I was doing my philosophy class in college, university, that was really a moment I spent a lot of time with books, discovering new things. So that was also very stimulating for me. But I remember that time as very intellectually stimulating, and I really enjoyed that time. Yeah.
But besides discussing the great questions of philosophy with your classmates over a bottle of wine, what do young people in Lyon do, or students, university students? What do they do for fun when they're not in class?
I think most of I will say in any kind of university city, so people will definitely do sport, cultural activities. I think it's a city where you have a lot of cultural activities like drama theater. It's also the city where cinema has been invented by the Frères Lumière, like the Lumière brothers. So there's a very interesting movie cinema museum with like cinematheque. So I actually spent a lot of time like watching movies. Really, that was also really fascinating with that. This is a city where you also, it's super close to like a countryside. It's really close to the Alps. It's just like 1 hour, 2 hours by train. So people actually love going skiing or like walking, like hiking.
Yeah, like I said before, it must have been really difficult to actually do your schoolwork. It sounds so wonderful.
Yeah, it's actually
but in all seriousness, philosophy is a very difficult subject, right? I mean, the concepts are challenging. You got to read a lot, as you said. Sometimes it's not clear what those authors and philosophers were talking about. But was there anything or any advice that, or like a mentor? Was there a professor who said something or gave you some kind of message that really made an impression on you that you could take into your future career no matter what you're doing?
Actually I spent a lot of time reading, but I was actually reading exactly the same pages because it was so difficult. I had to read a lot of these pages for me to understand. So I think something that had a huge influence on me was once my teacher said, one of my teacher, she said, philosophy is all about asking questions. And I think that's really important when you think about it. Like sometimes we all think we know things and we all keep answers as we take it for granted. But sometimes it's also really, healthy to just ask questions, and I think this is something that in my career or, in what I'm doing now, I also try to see, it's very important to ask questions and not necessarily to bring all the answers. And I think what philosophy is very important about, is very critical about, is like it gives you more like a method, a way to develop your own critical thinking. And especially at the time when with social media, we are literally surrounded by so much information. It's also important to have your own point of view, or to be able to build your own point of view. The very same teacher actually once told me, like, there's no, usually we think about philosophy, the big concepts like truth or life or justice, but actually she told me, like, this is more like a mindset, a way to think about things, and anything can be pretty like an object of philosophy. And once actually she asked us a question that was, what is a house? As a philosophy topic. And she told us, you can actually take a house as a topic to think about it, because it seems obvious, this is just like, we all know what a house is, but how do you differentiate it with like other buildings, or what is very specific about this? So just to tell you that is more like a mindset. I think this is very important for everyone to have this critical thinking.
Well, hopefully, though, in your work in the Foreign Service, you're bringing up too many questions. I don't know, you might get in trouble. Sometimes you just got to decide on the policy.
Exactly. This is what I was going to say.
And carry it out.
Yes, but also sometimes asking questions allow you to find a way to find an answer. Because sometimes, like, if you don't even ask it, like, you don't even see a way, about it. So,
and then afterwards, you got a master's degree in Asian Studies at a very famous school called Sciences Po. Tell us a bit about why this school is so famous in France and globally.
So Sciences Po is a school in Paris. It has been there for like really long time. I think it was established at the end of 19th century. I think it's very famous because it's very competitive to get in. Like the selection process is super, super hard. It's only a bunch of people who can be like selected every year. And I think what is very special about Sciences Po, and you don't really have that in other schools, is that this is the only place where you can have a range of let's say like political sciences related topics. So you can study like in the same time, like political sciences, economics, history, languages. So it's really diverse. It's not only like you go to study economics or you go study like history. It's like all together. So students actually going to Sciences Po, they will have a curriculum where they will study all these topics. So that makes it like really rich, like really diverse. So this is why I guess it makes it very special. And it's true that actually this is considered usually as an elite school, because this is where a lot of our ministers, even president, I think, like have been, they come from this school. So, but it's definitely, actually, yeah, it usually ranks like really pretty good in international.
And now I'm going to ask you a really tough question, because you described how rigorous the education was at Sciences Po. But then afterwards, you joined the Foreign Service, and you did Asia-related work, both at headquarters in Paris, and you've worked in different cities here in Asia as well. Now, looking back at what they taught you, and what your professor said, or the reading materials, and then actually doing Asia-related work, do you look back and say, like, wow, those professors or those textbooks, they don't really know the facts on the ground and what is really going on with, economic, trade issues or other issues in the region?
Well, no, I cannot say that otherwise. Like, I think my professors will be like really upset. But no, actually, I think I had amazing professors, and they were all amazing experts on these fields, and I really learned a lot with them. And actually, when I came here, in Asia, I could realize that what they taught us was actually really relevant. I learned a lot with them. We had, experts on different countries. That could be like China, India, Korea, and I think all of them told us a lot of amazing things.
And you mentioned China, and of course, when you get into your line of work, China is going to be important if you're focused on Asia, as is India or Korea, Japan. When you were beginning your career or still finishing the master's, did you ever say to yourself, like, I can't wait to do stuff in some of the less well-known places in Asia, like I want to be in Laos or East Timor, the places that not everybody is wanting to work in or talk about or do business with?
Well, because I was I started learning Chinese when I was in college, and then so my focus was really more like the Chinese-speaking world. But actually, I decided to go to Hong Kong to study. I did a 1-year exchange in Hong Kong University, and then I came to Taiwan to do 1 year of language training. So I definitely liked coming to places where there was a trend at that time, I would say to early 2000s, where a lot of people were actually going to mainland China, because I think that was that was a trend, and business was booming. Also, civil society was booming in mainland China, so there was a lot of things happening. But I was actually more interested in discovering Hong Kong and Taiwan, and and then it's really funny because it actually, now it's definitely part of my job, and I'm here posted in Taiwan, so literally 13 years after that. So.
Yeah, so from student to diplomat.
Right.
We're going to take a short break,
Sure.
but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the French community here in Taipei, and a little bit about the work that the French office in Taipei does. You're listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station.
有长照服务需求、长照特别扣除额问题，请拨打1966长照专线，5分钟内通话免付费。一通电话让长期照顾管理专员协助申请长期照顾服务及解答长期照顾特别扣除额相关问题。以上内容由台北市政府卫生局提供。
爸爸应酬不开车，黄色嘟嘟安全多。应酬喝酒不过量，安全回家最上道。爸爸要平安回家哦。
喝酒不开车，开车不喝酒哦。让我们一起尊重生命，拥抱亲情。
亲爱的民众，提醒您定期清除排油烟机内部油垢。烹煮食物时，切忌分心做其他事情，并注意人离火熄。且厨房附近应设置灭火器，操作时保持适当距离。当厨房火灾时，严禁以水灭火。油锅起火也千万不要移动油锅，以免翻覆造成火势扩大延烧。以上内容由台北市政府消防局提供。
亲爱的朋友，您还在吸烟吗？快拿着健保卡到戒烟门诊或拨打戒烟专线0800636363。提醒您，最近兴起的电子烟、加热烟，因为没有浓浓的烟臭味，就被认为无害。其实已经证实，新兴烟品都有二手烟及三手烟的危害，甚至还有爆炸的风险。我是义工蔡依林，所有烟品都 get out。我拒烟，我骄傲。
我是疾管署防疫师陈婉清。防疫期间，如果您是正在居家隔离或检疫的民众，请留在家中或隔离检疫场所，不可随意外出。若您在隔离检疫期间出现发烧、嗅味觉异常、腹泻、呼吸道症状或身体不适，请佩戴口罩，联系卫生局或1922，并依指示就医，不可自行搭乘大众运输。如果您有洗牙、健检等非紧急医疗需求，请先暂缓延后。
有政府，请安心。资讯由疾管署提供。
大家好，我是防疫车队的司机汪佑廷。我是一位专业的驾驶，在防疫期间负责将入境台湾的旅客平安送往检疫地点。作为防疫车队的驾驶，必须接受完整的防疫教育训练，确实做好个人防护措施，定时消毒车内环境，保护旅客及自己的健康。接种公费 COVID-19 疫苗后，不仅让我更安心执行每一次接送任务，也让家人更放心支持我的工作。
有政府，请安心。资讯由疾管署提供。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？我当家。你当家？我当家。
我当家。
到底谁当家？你来当家。
Welcome back to Residence Messenger. Our guest today is Pierre Goulange from the French office in Taipei in advance of Bastille Day next week. Pierre, France and Taiwan have a long history, actually. It goes back to the 19th century, some French involvement in Taiwan. Tell us a bit about the French community here in Taipei City specifically. Who are they? What do they do? If you could tell us how many people there are.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so we have the French community in Taiwan is pretty big. We have around 2,500 people registered to our office, but usually it doesn't include, like students or, when borders are open, like travelers. So, usually we think there's around like 4,000 people, but it's pretty much the same number as like the French community in a country like Korea, which is much bigger than Taiwan. So there's definitely quite a big community here in Taiwan. And what is very interesting is that the number doubled in the last 10 years. So it's a huge increase of people like coming and sitting out here.
Is that the same? You mentioned French community in Korea. When I was living in Hong Kong, for example, there were also lots of French people moving there. It seemed like a good destination, partially because China was growing as well. what is it about Taipei that's attractive to French people?
I think Taipei, as for a lot of foreigners, Taipei is a very amazing city to live in. People are just like really nice, very welcoming. This is a friendly city when it comes to set up, business or, I think actually most of our community is based in Taipei. I think 70% of them live here. Some of them more in the south, Kaohsiung, or they're mostly doing teaching. They do also like cultural activities. We'll do like research in universities, like think tanks. We also have big companies. I think this is also for the last 10 years. We had big companies doing like some activities here in Taiwan. For the most famous like Carrefour or Decathlon, which is like sport equipment company, or some less famous also like started working here. So I think people here find a very welcoming environment, and as you said, culture like exchanges between France and Taiwan as a long history, but I think for the last 10-15 years there's been a real increase in terms of like cooperation or cultural activities, so it's definitely bringing like new people here.
Do you have to try and convince people at headquarters? You said the number of French people here is increasing. Do you have to convince people at headquarters to give your office more resources? Look, there's more potential, and there's a bigger community of French people. There's potential for more cultural exchange. Or do people in the French government? We know Taiwan. Yeah, great.
Yeah, definitely. I think like my colleagues in the French foreign ministry, but definitely. They actually pay more attention to Taiwan and to the French community here. They're definitely more interested. For the last couple of years, I can see a growing interest in there. That's for sure. Yeah.
What about a COVID-19 situation? Or you personally, or other French people that you speak to here in Taipei? What was the conversations like over the last 18 months when you speak with family? Because there was a period of time when the situation was more difficult in France, and we were having normal day-to-day life here. Then we've had a bit of a difficult period here. Share with our listeners a bit about French people in Taipei and their own kind of COVID-19 experience.
Right. So what is really funny is that when last year, I don't know if you remember that, but there was a moment when EU decided to close its border, right? And then all travelers had to go back, to rush back home and to find a flight, and sometimes it was very crazy. So all our colleagues, all embassies, French embassies in the world, were actually trying to help French nationals to go back home, to find a way to go back home. But here in Taiwan, actually we were asked by the French community to help us to stay here in Taiwan, because the situation in Taiwan was so much better than in Europe. So French people actually wanted to stay in Taiwan, and the good thing is that the Taiwanese authorities, extended, the stay for foreigners, so that allows a lot of our nationals to stay here. So this is a really good point, and I think so far our community is very grateful for the government, the way they handle the situation here. They feel very safe and very easy, and that's been very good for this.
When you talk to French people in Taipei, what do they miss the most about France? I mean, the easy answer is always food. Right. So if you're going to tell us food, Pierre, give us something more specific than just saying food. Sure. What do French people in Taipei typically miss the most about home?
Yeah, food. Well, I think it's more like what French people miss, what French people abroad miss generally. And I guess it's true that there are some stuff that is really hard to find here, some kind of cheese or let's say not expensive wine. So, but I would say probably people miss a little bit sitting outside in restaurants or dining, outdoor dining.
Not as common here in Taipei.
Or drinks, but it's not that common. But I could find some places where you can do it. It's really, really, really nice, really amazing. Probably I would say also some a cultural life. Paris is known to be a city that is very dynamic when it comes to the cultural scene. Taipei also, it's also very active, dynamic, but maybe some people will feel especially when it comes to movies, But I guess that with the internet, it's not as bad as it could be a couple of years ago. When you actually ask like French people living abroad, one of the things that comes pretty regularly, that's like social security. So our social security back home, it's pretty generous. So when you live abroad, you actually have to usually get a private insurance. But in Taiwan, I think it's pretty okay. Like because people with ARC, they are part of the Qianbaoka, and I think that's usually pretty good.
So here you don't get the short work week, like the 6 week holiday in August. You get in France.
Right, yes. But 6 weeks. Yeah, 6 weeks. Yeah, usually.
Tell us about the activities of the French office in Taipei. First of all. Just for clarity, what's the difference between your office and the Alliance Française?
Yes. So Alliance Française is basically a teaching school. This is a place where you can learn French.
But is that run by the government?
Actually, this is so it's a local association, but there's a president who is Taiwanese, but there's a French executive director, and it's kind of like related to our government and to our office, but it's really different from in the sense of our office, because what they do is literally like they teach French, right, to students or anyone interested in French language. So our office is more like the official representation of France here in Taiwan. So we do work like, any kind of embassy in our countries. So we do have a political section, press communication, cultural department, economic, trade department. And we have our director who's been here for 2 years now.
You mentioned the dealing with the press, part of what your office does. What kind of inquiries do you get from the Taiwan media? Yeah. What do they want to know about France?
So, usually media will get in touch with us like when they want to know like the position of France on Taiwan related issues, or when there's anything related to France Taiwan in the news. So for example, I think the last time we had a lot of requests was when there was a French senator called Alain Richard, who actually got a letter from the Chinese ambassador in Paris.
Don't go to Taiwan.
Yeah, he said literally that. And then he said he will still come to Taiwan. And we got a lot of requests from Taiwanese media about like when is he coming, and
you said call the senator's office, don't call us.
No, we responded. I think he definitely wants to come. The question is more like when, but it's more like related to the pandemic and also restrictions when it comes to traveling. But we all wait for him, and we hope he can come as soon as possible. But otherwise, I have some questions. Like I remember, like the first time I had an interview here in Taiwan when I arrived 2 years ago. One of the first questions, like the journalist asked me, was like, "Can you tell me why French people don't want to speak English with us?" Or I will have.
Did they ask you that in Mandarin or in French?
Actually, that was in Mandarin. Yeah. But also, I have sometimes like questions like really kind of. That goes to kind of like a little bit like what France is known abroad. So for example, we say, but why French people are always on strike? Or why are French people always on holidays? This kind of questions. So, but it's good because it gives me also the opportunity to give a more accurate picture of like, France and what it is. Because it's true that abroad and in Taiwan also, people have usually a good image of France, as a, cultural, romantic, nice country. But sometimes it's also a little bit like, stereotypical like image of France. So we also try to give more like, I would say like a comprehensive picture of the country. And
And also, I mentioned to you before the show began that we could watch France TV here in Taiwan now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah, there's several channels.
Several channels.
Yeah, including news channels.
News channels, yeah.
So it's actually relatively easy nowadays for people here in Taiwan to get the accurate.
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
In non-COVID times, so before COVID restricted the ability to have in-person events, What were some of the more high-profile or important activities of the French office? Were they related to trade, related to culture? Tell us a bit about some of the important initiatives.
So so I think our office here, compared to other offices, has a big cultural department. So we do a lot of like cooperation, cultural activities. So for example, we were working with the Taipei city government to have the Nuit Blanche, so White Night. So it's a huge event. It's actually during one night. There will be a lot of like cultural, like artistic performances. It could be like painters, like musicians, and so last year it took place in Nehru, I think, if I'm not wrong. So it gathers usually like hundreds of thousands of people. So it comes from Paris, so White Night in Paris, and now some cities in the world actually start doing it. And we have a cooperation with Taipei city government, and it's great events. It's always very successful. Also, we do have like some events like Night of Ideas. So it's one night of debates, exchanges. We usually bring experts on a specific topic, and we ask people, to have a discussion on a specific topic. We also have film festivals. We do have big exhibitions going up. We had a exhibition partnership with Goulange, with a National Museum Palace here in Taiwan. We brought also, I'm thinking about last year there was a art biennale in Taiwan, and the commissioner was a French philosopher, Bruno Latour, and the other French artistic curator was also a French art expert. So we have this kind of exchanges and with great institutions. We also do have events related. But we work with like the European office, because as part of the EU, we try to also promote the EU here in Taiwan, or to explain what it is, or so there's a European Film Festival. We do also like some activities like a beach cleanup. So every year, like a whole like staff of European office will go to a beach to clean. It's kind of like to raise awareness about environmental issues. We do have a Christmas market in Taipei every year
with French products.
Yeah, some actually French companies, but it's more like last year, but it was more in a European like format. So there were also like companies of European member states selling some countries, but definitely you have like French companies selling wine, and like bakeries with stuff like that.
And now it's pretty easy to get to France from Taipei, right? I mean, compared to years ago, there are more flight options.
Yes. Right. Yes, definitely. We now we just all hope that the situation can get better when it comes to the pandemic, so we can fly more easily. But
what activities have you been able to shift online format from your office?
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. So now we are working on some conferences or seminars or workshops, so we do that online. There's one coming up next week about science and gastronomy. We work with the National Taiwan Science Education Center, but it's true that big events is going to be hard to online. I'm thinking, for example, of our Bastille Day reception next week. No, it's definitely we're not going to do it online. We are trying to work online, maybe with some events. We've been also, one part of our job also been to work on human rights, because Taiwan and France kind of share human rights and values, common values, universal values. I think this is something that is really strong in our relationship, and our office has been working really closely with NGOs, civil society, on topics related to LGBT rights, or some other, or sometimes on more sensitive topics. I'm thinking about death penalty, for example, which is a very controversial, sensitive topic here in Taiwan. But we do have relations with NGOs, and we do host some events.
Which are open to the public?
Yeah, open to the public. For example, movie screening, discussion. It can be also more a reading, this kind of stuff. Yeah. So this kind of events, I think, for example, we do usually host every year an event at the occasion of International Day Against Death Penalty, and it's a situation in Taiwan. I think it's definitely getting better, but this is a kind of event we can turn online. Yeah.
And once we return to normal activities, which hopefully will be soon, could you give us a preview of what are going to be some of the big in-person events that you hope to have?
Yeah, I think the next big event this autumn will be a movie festival. So we're going to have movies from the New Wave, French New Wave. So, like movie directors like Godard or Jacques Rivet, all these kind of people. So we plan to screen these movies in a lot of different cities in Taiwan, sorry. So Taipei, Taoyuan, Kaohsiung, and it's definitely a great opportunity for people to watch like some great movies.
Anyone from France going to fly over? An important actor or actress or director? Watch this space.
Hopefully, we just hope for this. Yeah.
Okay, Pierre, we're almost out of time, and we're so grateful that you were able to join us today to talk about the French office in Taipei. But for the public who wants to find out more about upcoming activities, what's the website or Facebook page that people should go to?
Sure. Yeah. So I really please feel free to actually follow us on Facebook. We also have an Instagram account. It's really new. We just launched a couple of months ago. So we usually have posts on our activities, on different news related to France. So if people are interested, they can follow us on Facebook.
And what should they Google search to find it?
French office in Taipei.
French office in Taipei.
Yeah, or in French, Bureau Français de Taipei.
Terrific. Well, Pierre Goulange from the French office in Taipei, happy Bastille Day to you. And thank you for coming on to our show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You've been listening to a Resonance Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Have a great weekend.